After prosecutors in the state of California notified the public that they would not charge the cops involved in the Stephon Clark shooting, the prosecutors are now saying that they are going to hand this case over to the federal government for further review. So according to the Los Angeles Times, California's top prosecutor declined to file charges against the two Sacramento police officers, Terrence Mercadal and Jared Robinet, who fired on Stephon Clark 20 times after mistaking his cell phone for a gun. Clark was struck at least 7 times and died at the scene, later determined to be his grandmother's backyard. So we've covered this story throughout, but I just want to note one thing that really bothered me about one of the latest, updates to this story. Prosecutors felt the need to release things about him to make him look like this horrible person, just to do character assassination. It was not in any way in addition to the details we needed to know about the shooting. It had nothing to do with the shooting. It had nothing to do with what happened on that day. It was just stuff about his past, just to do character assassination. Anyway, US Attorney McGregor Scott and Sean Reagan, who heads the FBI Sacramento office, said the federal probe would examine results of the state and local investigations and will determine whether the slaying of Clark violated his federal civil rights. I don't have a lot of faith in the federal government right now, so I'm not holding my breath on that. But there have been protests in the Sacramento area as a result of this case and how the prosecutors are refusing to press charges against the cops. And 81 people, including 2 journalists, were rounded up and arrested during these protests.
They did the protests in wealthy areas of Sacramento. So twice as many members of the SWAT team showed up as protesters, arrested 80 people. So those folks got arrested, but the cops who shot an unarmed guy did not get arrested. So let's just be clear about that. So the people protesting could face jail time. The cops do not face jail time. Now, to the point that Anna was making, well, 2 of them. One on the federal government coming in. I'm glad they're reviewing the case, but it's hard to have a lot of faith in it these days. And there's good career prosecutors in the FBI or investigators in the FBI and prosecutors in the Justice Department, but they just did Terrence Crutcher's case, and we talked about it on the show yesterday. And the federal government looked at it and said no civil rights violations, even though another unarmed black man, his hands clearly up in the air, no question about it, shot point blank, and nope, I don't see any civil rights violations. So it's good news that they're looking into it, but it's hard to have much faith. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about is how they did the character assassination. They said he had traces of drugs in his system. What does traces mean, right? And they do this every time. And marijuana stays in your system for 40 days, okay? And then they threw a whole bunch of other things in there. I don't know if it's true or untrue. I don't know what kind of trace that it had. And so they have to find a way to blame him. Oh, he had a loud, angry phone call with his girlfriend right before the cops showed up. What does that have to do with anything, right? What are we doing here? So now the part that is true is that he had, and we said this in our original coverage of it, we have more details today. The cops were investigating something real, okay? They thought it was more breaking and entering and theft, etc. But no, it turns out Clark had done vandalism. He had broken the windows of some vehicles, and he jumped a fence, and he also hit the sliding glass door with a cinder block. So, okay, you want to go get him for that stuff? Of course, we totally agree with that. But more, I would argue even, and people can disagree about this, even more important to me than getting these particular cops, see whether they're getting them fired, arrested, et cetera, is for God's sake, stop teaching them 2 things. One is fire right away. Don't bother to see if he has a gun, okay? And they do it. They say, the saying I've told you 100 times, that all the cops say it in almost every district. Better to be judged by 12 than carried out by 6. That means just kill him and worry about a jury. You likely won't even get one. The prosecutors let you off every time, and they did in this case. But even if you did go to a jury, it's much better than taking any chance with your life. The second thing is they let him bleed out. After you shoot a guy, go stop the bleeding. You fired at him 20 times, you hit him 7 times. He's clearly bleeding out. And they're like, put your hands up. Don't.
Well, one of the issues is the very, like the standard that's used in order to give these police officials or cops immunity, right, in these cases. So all you have to do is say, I feared for my life. That's it, I feared for my life. That's what keeps coming up over and over again. And so there needs to be a higher standard for opening fire other than I feared for my life. Because he didn't have a gun. They mistook his cell phone for a gun, right? And then they shoot without asking questions, and then if you can recall the video, after he had been laying face down on the ground for a while, they finally approached him and they handcuffed him.
Yeah, that's when they finally get to him. They don't stop the bleeding. At that point, it's clear he doesn't have a gun. It's clear that he's bleeding out. They handcuff him first because he's so dangerous. Now, they have got to fix this system, whether it's holding the prosecutors accountable. Real Justice PAC is looking to do that in this case. You should go help them do that. But most importantly, fixing the training, because we're training the cops to be afraid nonstop. In Oklahoma case, the Terrence case, 5 cops surrounding him, broad daylight. His hands are up in the air. She shoots him from short distance away. They go, afraid for my life. He was gonna overwhelm 5 cops with no weapon and hands in the air. No, this standard is terrible. And it is allowing people, unfortunately, to shoot unarmed people nonstop, and we've got to put an end to it. On the go, don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.